Okay, we're live on YouTube. I'm gonna try to go live on Instagram too. Okay, good morning, everybody. Happy St. Nicholas Day, St. Nicholas Tag. I'm Bonnie, and I wanted to come on. I decided to do a live, and I wanted to read you guys about all about the real St. Nicholas, not the folklore. I want to read about the guy from the 3rd and 4th century, and I have this free printable. I put the free printable link in the description on YouTube, also on Instagram. It's just in the story previous to this. There's a link that you can click on. This is a free download for you to read your kids on St. Nicholas Day, or you can get them to join you here and you can read with me. So that's all good too. I see Instagram. Okay, there we go. It's good. It said pause for poor connection. But yesterday, my kids and I, we were gonna do some other stuff for school, and all of a sudden I saw that Gather Round did a hymn study, and then Rebecca did it live with her family, so you could print it out and do it live with her. And I was like, that's a really fun idea. And we did it yesterday, and then I was like, that's what I'm gonna do today for St. Nicholas Day. So in the morning here, it's so dark that I've already read this to my kids, so I'm not gonna have my kids gather around me. And I didn't wanna make them wait, because we always wake up and they find their little boots with all their little chocolates in there, German chocolate, and then we read the St. Nicholas story. So we have actually done that already. This is me just retelling it. But St. Nicholas, I've named this St. Nicholas, the mission-minded man, and you're gonna see why. What I really strove for in this study wasn't to go back and see what we know all about, St. Nicholas miracles and folklore and stuff. My goal was that we would understand the time that he existed, what was happening with the church, what was happening with Rome and that kind of thing, and his part of the world. And it really was interesting to do the research and to do this little write-up. It's not super long, so I thought this is a really good way for us to dive in. I did do all the painting in here. This is St. Nicholas, how I imagine him. I did do some research for like what they would wear and the era and stuff, it's just a really different picture than I think the St. Nicholas that we see in just art and that kind of thing, normally. So let me read this for you. So we're doing St. Nicholas, the mission-minded man. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in that time that Jesus lived? Or be one of the first Christians? Before human ears had heard the rumble of a motor, before the plays of William Shakespeare, before the time of knights and castles, go back farther, before printing presses, gunpowder, eyeglasses, or even clocks, our history to discover today takes us back in time only to a few generations after Jesus was born. In a town by the sea, a boy was born sometime between the years of 260 and 200 AD named Nicholas. Now, he may have had a different name when he was young, but we don't know what it was. We do know that he was known as Nicholas when he was older. So for the purposes of this study today, we're going to call him Nicholas. Instagram does say it's still pausing a little bit. Sorry, Instagram, if it's a little bit flaky. I'm on YouTube as well, going live. All right, so he would grow up to love Jesus and become a very famous missionary indeed. The place where he was born was called Patara. And do you know what's so neat about it? Just a few generations before Nicholas was born, Paul, like Paul from the Bible, came to Patara on one of his missionary journeys to change ships. You can read about it in Acts 21, verse 1. Isn't it neat to think that those missionary journeys we read about in scripture would have played a huge part in Nicholas and his family knowing and serving the Lord? I just love that. That was one of my favorite discoveries when I did the research for this. There's a little note on this page that says, if you wanted to find Patara on a map today, you could look for the area of Lycia, Turkey. Patara, which was later named Arsinoe, was ruined later in history, but much of it was preserved in sand for historians to find. But if you guys are looking at a map, pull out Europe, look at Turkey, and look for the Lycia area. That's about where Patara was. I do have a map on the printable. See if you guys can see that on both my screens here. So this is, you can see Italy. Do you see the boot? We have the Mediterranean Sea. This is Europe, but this map is back from the Roman Empire in 280 AD. So all the green you see is the Roman Empire. And right in here, we have Patera and Myra. I don't know if you guys can see that well, but you guys can print out the printable to see this map up close. But in Turkey area here, we have Patera, and we're gonna learn about Myra on this page here too. So let's go back again to when Nicholas would have been around. Imagine the time in history when Rome was very powerful. Remember Rome? It was all the green stuff. Not the city of Rome that you can find on a map today, but the Roman Empire. Rome was a huge territory around the Mediterranean Sea. Paul and the first missionaries had spread the gospel to Rome and the lands around Patera well, and so many people had come to know Jesus and teach their children about him in the area where Nicholas grew up. When he was a child, no church buildings had ever been built yet, and church meetings would have been in homes and secret places to worship together and read precious copies of scripture and apostle letters. Some of those letters weren't even 200 years old yet. Being a Christian was not allowed in the Roman Empire, but more and more people were following Jesus all the time, and Christianity was growing. I love that. I love to imagine St. Nicholas was around before there were even church buildings yet. It would have been a very difficult but exciting time, especially to see that even though Christianity wasn't allowed, it was growing. I love that. History documents that Nicholas's parents raised him to be a devout Christian, but they died while he was still young during an epidemic. He was not a poor orphan turned onto the street, however. They were a wealthy family, and so Nicholas would have inherited all that they had. Nicholas followed the footsteps of church work from his uncle, who was a bishop in Myra, that other city on the map, close to where Nicholas was born. And he also became a bishop there when he was a young man. But if you're thinking bishops, hold on. Popes and bishops in the church didn't have any political power yet. Remember, there were no church buildings. Church was groups of Christians. So they had no power yet at this point in history, or even a building for services. They were workers serving wherever they were needed in the establishing of church community. So I love to think, we always, it's really easy to look up St. Nicholas online and see, oh, he was a bishop. What's really cool is you can throw out the picture that you have of bishops in church and power and fancy robes and that kind of thing. Well, St. Nicholas was wealthy. Maybe he did wear a pretty nice robe, but it's just a totally different picture than what we would picture otherwise. So just remember that the time that he was a bishop for the church community, not church building yet. In 303, this is AD, the Roman emperor, I'm going to mess this up, Diocletian, I think his name is Diocletian, I think that's how you say it, was convinced by other politicians that the growth of the Christian religion must stop. And so there were years when the government burned many meeting places and put many people, including Nicholas, in prison who were meeting and working and spreading the gospel. So even St. Nicholas himself, or Nicholas as he was called then, was put in prison. In prison, how the believers must have been praying for the Lord to help them, and what faith they must have had to still be loving Jesus and preaching about Jesus no matter what the cost. Nicholas would have grown up and lived in a time of seeing so many demonstrate their faith in the face of danger and overcoming much fear, and he himself also had to do that. I am getting goosebumps. I just think this is exciting to me to hear this side of his story. Bringing the answer to so many prayers of the church, Constantine the Great would come into power in Rome. Have you ever heard that name before? He was a pretty amazing and famous ruler. He not only helped the Empire of Rome, but decided to support the church and relieve the government persecution against the Christians in the land. He made sure that Christianity became legal in the year 313 AD, meaning that churches no longer had to meet in secret. Prisoners who had been chained for sharing the gospel were now set free. Totally different. What kind of passion for Christ and the gospel would have exploded from a generation like Nicholas's? I always pause here with my kids so that they really think about this. What kind of passion would this generation have had? They just spent hundreds of years or a couple hundred years with illegal Christianity, persecution, burned homes and stuff like that. And all of a sudden it was allowed to be public. Like Christianity was already growing while it was suppressed. And now it's open, it's legal. Like I just feel like this would have been amazing. I would imagine the unquenchable fire that burned in the hearts of believers was fanned into an even more enormous flame with Christians' newfound freedom in the land. History tells us that Nicholas felt especially called in ministry to the poor and the needy, and devoted his life and all of his rich inheritance to helping them. Growing up by the sea, he had a love for sailors and ships and was also known to have a special place in his heart for children. This is where we start to see the connection between our Nicholas character we've been reading about and the man we've heard called Saint Nicholas. He was so generous and known for giving that word spread far and wide of his name and his deeds, all the stuff he was doing. Nicholas would have been witness to the earliest church buildings being constructed, and though it was not canonized while he was alive, the church would have been reading copies of letters and scriptures that became our biblical canon we know today. So all of that stuff was written, but it wasn't canonized yet, which is something that I was talking to my kids about this morning, because I say canon very easily, but I kind of forget that, they might not know what the canon is. The canon is our books of the Bible that have come together in what we know as our Bible today. So being a bishop to house churches during this difficult time of Diocletian would have probably looked very different from being a bishop during a peaceful reign for the Christians when Constantine was in charge. With churches still growing and church buildings being raised for gathering together, workers in the church were getting organized. Nicholas was able to spread his generosity and be part of church ministry for 30 more years until December 6th of 343 AD. Today is December 6th. Today is St. Nicholas Day. He died on December 6th, 343 AD. He was buried in his cathedral church in Myra, and people would remember him and his story on that date every single year after that. The cathedral that was once in Myra, by the way, was destroyed, but is now replaced by the St. Nicholas Cathedral that is standing there today. So the St. Nicholas Cathedral that is there is not the original, but it's in the same spot. So on the printable, I do have a summary timeline of kind of all the things we've talked about, which is really cool. If you guys want to do the printable and print it out and just check it out, it's a really nice little visual. But we'll wrap this up. Nicholas was a man whose faith was tested, whose obedience was used to help the poor and needy, whose life story shows us one who spread the love of Christ with all of his ability and the ability that God gave him. The next time you hear the name St. Nicholas, remember his real story and the encouragement it is to us today. May the story of St. Nicholas encourage us to have an unwavering faith, even in the face of adversity, to be generous with all that we have in this life, and to love Jesus Christ with our whole hearts, our lives, and our lives in service to the kingdom. I have a few notes a little bit on the back about St. Nicholas relating to the Santa that we know. So just heads up. Okay, so what made Santa folktales the legends that we have today? The Santa and his reindeer that we have in pop culture today have evolved over the last 200 years, due mostly to poems and books that have been enjoyed by families and morphed that missionary that we once knew into the magical myth that we now know as Santa. The name, though, St. Nicholas, how did St. Nicholas become the name Santa? The evolution of the name St. Nicholas to the connection of the modern day name Santa stems from the Dutch. People in Holland who remembered and celebrate St. Nicholas Day every year, they pronounced St. Nicholas Sint Nicolaas. And then in their language, and they eventually came and immigrated to the States, mostly into New York. And in the USA, and they were reported to gather and celebrate in honor of St. Nicholas Day every December 6th, according to local papers. I found as early as 1776, the papers in New York were saying, hey, all these Holland people have this great holiday where they celebrate St. Nicholas. From there, folk tales and legends about this man from long ago really started to morph and change, as well as the popularity of the English name Santa Claus. Oh, I missed a part. Because the Dutch started to shorten the name to Sinterklaas, and then that evolved into Santa Claus. Anyways, so there's a little short synopsis of the real story of St. Nicholas. We read this every St. Nicholas Day with my kids. We do the German tradition. I have a German background, so on the 5th, on December 5th, my kids put their boots out, and when they wake up in the morning, there's German chocolate in them, and we read about St. Nicholas. It's not my German tradition to read about the real guy, but that's my heart. I really want to read and teach my kids the real story behind some of these things. We're not an anti-Santa family, but we don't go really big into it. We don't do all that stuff. I guess I don't have to go into all that, but I really just want my kids to know the real story. I want to teach my kids truth. That's my heart. And I think his story is just amazing, especially when you picture his time in history. I think for me, making this, that was the big thing, is to picture the time that he was around. And that gives us a whole new perspective on the real St. Nick. Anyway, I hope this blessed you guys today. I hope you guys have a wonderful St. Nicholas Day. Thanks for joining me live. I was a little nervous, but I feel like I didn't stumble over reading this too much, and no kids came and started screaming upstairs. So that was good. Anyway, we will talk to you guys later. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. See if I can end these. End.